Good morning, all the champs. Hope you are doing good. And Assalamu alaikum. So hope you have understood all the classes, all the previous 4 lectures, because those lectures are the prerequisite for starting today's lecture, right? So, if you have not seen, make sure that you have not only seen, not only watched, but understood all the four previous lectures, including 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, now we start with class 5 of JSP without wasting much of your time. I deleted everything. Now we have a plain page right here before you, if you can see this. So the page does nothing. It has only the design pattern. Alright, so what we'll be doing today is follow the main object oriented standard, which is MVC pattern, and we'll be also using classes and servlet instead of JSP page only. So JSP is only meant for UI logic. It's meant for presentation logic, right? You cannot put all the code here and do the job that has to be done by other classes and Java. Alright, so we'll be doing the divide and conquer rule today, right? So let's see where we go. Okay, let's get started. Alright, so the first thing that we have to remember is we have the source package here. So the source package will contain all the Java class files. Okay, so I'll make a Java class file and I'll name this as model, and model will go inside a package models, right? So first thing first, okay, now I have done it. Okay, and the second thing that I'll be doing today is make a new Java class and call this as accounts controller, and this will go inside the controller package. Okay, all right, so we will be applying full object oriented slowly and steadily. Right, so model, the job of model is to do only give and take of data, right? So we have to create functions, a different function for setting the data, or maybe for reading the data we have a different function, and from for writing we have a different function. For example, if I make this variable here, I call this private string username, another private string password, right? So now we know that these are not going to be accessed outside the class because the class is public. You can access the class, you can create object of the class, but you cannot access private variables or private member variables of a class, right? So these properties are specifically as that of the model class privately, right? You can access them only inside the class. Now let us give this username read permission. Can we create a function wherein we can give username only read permission? Yes, I will create a public function because I have to read from it, right? I don't have to write to it. So I will say the type of function here is, the type of variable is string. So I'll create the type of function as string. The return type of function is string, and let me call this as get user name. Why do I call this get username? Because it is meant to read, right? Meant to read, right? And give us the data whatever is inside this username. Since the function's return type is string, so I will say return this. This means within this class we have a private variable username, so I return this, right? So now whenever I call this get username function, it is going to give me anything that is inside this username. It's as simple as anything, right? So we call them as readers or getters. So I'll create another get password, right? And I will return to this password. So whatever is in this password will be returned to this string function, and when we call this we are only going to get. So now what we have been able to do so far is to create a mutable, you can say immutable get username and get password, because now we cannot write to them, we can only read from them. So there's no fun only reading when we know that there's no source writing to these variables, and we haven't set any source which could write to these variables, any source that could write to these variables. So to make any source, right, that could write to these variables is known as setter. So here I'll document them. I'm documenting them as getters. So now let's make setters. So getters for reading and setters for, right? So you will not understand the functionality, the complete functionality of getters and setters unless you go forward with the project and see that how we deploy these classes in a much complex situation, in a much complex project. So these classes provide us an edge, right, so that we have that portability of calling different classes and different methods, right? So you'll understand this slowly, but today you'll have to understand only how to create getters and setters, right? So now we know that I have read what is the way that I can create without calling these variables, right? So what is the way without, even without writing writing to these variables directly, which we cannot because they are private. So is there any other way that we can create so that we can write to them without even calling them directly? Even if we call them directly, yet we cannot set to them, right? Yeah, there is a way. We'll create another function, and this time it is going to be a void function because I need not to return anything back to the function. Why? Because I have to write to them. Okay, I'll create, for example, set user name. And now how do you set? I have to accept one parameter as string user name. So this string username. So you know that whenever you call this function set username, you'll have to pass one parameter, right? So we'll make sure that this parameter right here is inserted to this parameter. So I will say this dot username is equivalent to username. So whatever is in this username will be assigned to this dot username. So this is what we call as setter. They're as simple as anything. You'll not understand their positioning and their job as of now, right? Or right now, maybe after 4 or 5 or maybe 6 classes, you will say, hey, it's very important because what we are doing here, we're calling only one class, right? So if you know the logic of encapsulation, for example, if I tell you you have an entire box here, right? Or if I tell you I have 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes, or let me say 5 boxes, or in that case let us say we have 6 boxes, right? So these stray dogs are giving us, a bad time here, right, these days. So they often have cardiac arrest, so ignore their barking, right? So how many hands do you require to carry them? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hands are required to carry them. What I say I will encapsulate them, right? So I'll apply encapsulation and I'll encapsulate them one by one, right? So what happens after I encapsulate them? One carries another, another carries another. This is also not the right way of encapsulation, but you can call this as encapsulation, or I'll show you the most more beautiful way of encapsulation. So this is one, right? So this is second, right? And let us say this is third, and let us go for a bigger one. Let's call this as 4. So you may require 4 hands to carry all these things, but what I will do, I will encapsulate them inside a single box, right? So I will take the bigger box and drop smaller box in the bigger box, and then I will take another smaller box, take it in here, take it in here, and take this also. So now how many hands do you require to carry this? You will tell me, sir, we only require 1 hand. So now you can take an example. These are the member variables with getters and setters, right? These are all the member variables with getters and setters, and now we have only one big thing that we have to call. Once we call this, we called all, and this class, what we had named is as model. So this is our model class. We already given it a name, and if I say model, out of model I need to fetch data from any of the boxes right here. Let's assume that this box is username and this is password. So I'll say box.username, take this username out of box.password. So take this password out of the box, right? So this is how it happens, and this is how useful it is. Why? This is useful for portability. It gives us an edge and that luxury of using portable things in object-oriented programming in today's world. Because what is object-oriented programming? Or dealing in objects. So that's what we are doing. We're trying to deal in objects rather than calling username, password, and each and everything directly. We're dealing in objects right now, right? So the second thing that I will be doing here is creating one more thing that you will come to know later on. Right? So I'll say private, yeah, okay, let's say we not require it. No, we require it badly. Private string message. All right, so why do you require this message for? We require this message to pass those error messages, right? Because I told you at the beginning of the lecture, maybe in class 1, it's not only about giving user the response or handling the request and the response. It's about professionalism, and professionalism is giving user friendly messages, so that on those messages that the user can actually understand, right? So this is what we have to do. All the messages back to user, even if whether he's typing wrong username, or he's typing a wrong password, or if he has typed everything right, even if all the credentials are right, you can yet show a message that you have been successfully logged in. And we need to create getters and setters for this also. And as you know, there is a nice way for creating getters and setters. Right click, insert code, and you can select getters and setters. Only message is left because we already created getters and setters for username and password. So this part of my job is done, and now I will create 3 different things right here. I'll still apply the logic of abstraction, the logic of encapsulation in here. So I will say public void login. Alright, so I'll create a function login, and this time, if you remember the last time, the function was accepting string username and string password. So this time it's not going to accept string username and string password. So this is going to accept my model. So that model is in the package. You can see this right here. Okay, model is in package models.model, right? So I'll say model user, right? I call this as user, right? I'll create another function. So let me copy paste so that I can quickly create these functions which are required, right? So 2, 3. Okay, let me create 3 functions, or let me create 4 functions. So one is going to be private, another is going to be private, and the third one is going to be private. Now let us go back to this logic. Now what does abstraction say? Abstraction says providing relevant information outside the class in an object-oriented system. I don't need to provide information here, right? So I can make sure that you call only one box, right? And this box calls this box, and the box here is calling this box, and the box here is calling this box, and this is calling this. So this is encapsulation, but at the same time we have to apply the logic of abstraction. And abstraction says that do not provide unauthorized access outside the class to these variables or these functions. Okay, so what will I do? Let's say we have few functions right here. Let us consider accounts controller. Now this is accounts controller, right? And this accounts controller has a function known as login, right? So what I'm going to do, all the red is what I'll provide access to, and all the green is that I'm not going to provide access to, right? So this is second function, this is third, and this is fourth. I know that I have an object because the object name here is accounts controller. I'm going to make an object of accounts controller to access accounts controller. Let's call this as accounts controller. So now this is my accounts controller, and since I know the accounts controller has 3 functions, right? Or maybe let's not call this as accounts controller. Let's call this as accounts controller. Everything red is private, public, and everything green is private. Let's say, for example, this is my accounts controller, and in here is login function, right? So this is my accounts controller, and this is my login function. As you can see that I'm providing access to login function. That means I can create an object of accounts controller outside the class, which is accounts, or we can say accounts controller AC is equal to new accounts controller. So this is where I make an object of accounts controller, right? Because it's a public class. Public means you can call it outside from anywhere. And the second is also I can call AC dot login also, right? And I can pass my model also here. So now, and I want only these 2 things to be public. right? So because you have to reduce the overhead, otherwise you'll have to call all the functions. If I make an object of accounts controller and then call this login, I'll make sure the login calls this function internally, and this function calls this function internally, and this function calls this function internally. And this is what encapsulation is all about. Encapsulation, as I have already said, and it implements abstraction. Abstraction is providing relevant information outside the class in an object-oriented system, right? Now when it implements, when encapsulation implements abstraction, means there's no fun. If we have two public functions, there's no fun of making this as public function, this as public function, and this as public function. So why would you make them public functions when they're not meant to be called outside the class, right? So we'll declare this as private, and this as private, right? So that's what I'm doing. This is private, this is private, and this is private. Let's call this as is valid, right? Let's call another function is authentic, right? And authorize, and I'll make them as boolean so that I know what is happening. Authorize is void. This I'll make it as boolean. You already know boolean can return true or false, right? So I can say here, okay, let me validate it here. So I will say if user, now I said we have to call the object in takeout by using getters and setters. So I'll say if user dot get username dot equals empty, right? So I'll do this, or I'll say if it is not equivalent to empty, then do this. Else if it is equivalent to empty, I will say user dot set message. Now see, here I am taking username out, and here I am using the setter to write to message. Okay, I'll write the message, please write your user name, right? And now if you have successfully written your username, here I'll say return false, so that I know that the validation is not successful, right? And the user gets the user defined message as well. Okay, and now if he has written, I will check if user dot get password dot equals blank, right? Or you can use dot length. And if it is not blank, that means if now the user has given password, I will say return true, right? And if the user has not given the password, I will say return false. But before returning false, what I will again say user dot set message, please write your password. So this function is done. Right, what is the job of this function now? First, check whether the username is not blank. If it is blank, give user the warning and return back false to the function, so that we'll come to know that this is valid function, right? Is not, the data has not been validated by this valid function. And now the second step, if the password is blank, right? If you have not written any password, right? So what you do, if you basically, if it's not equivalent to blank, that means if there is something written in the password, return true. If not, right? Because what you are saying, if not, that means user.getPassword should not be equivalent to blank to execute this true. But if it is blank, else will be executed, right? And you say please write your password and return back false to the function. Now the job of valid function is done, and now is authentic. So I will say if user dot get username dot equals, let's say about any name. So I'll say my name, and so I will use comparison operator here. Sorry, user dot get password, right? So this is dot equals, all right, if username is Fahim, the username that user has entered is equivalent to Fahim, and the password that user has entered is equivalent to password. So in that case you return true. We'll come to know that the authentic function is returning true or return false. But before you return false, you also say that user dot set message, right, incorrect username or password. Do not tell the user whether the username is right or wrong, or the password is right or wrong. If you are telling user, no, username is right and password is wrong, or password is wrong or username is right, you're helping the hacker. So you have to tell him either the username or the password is correct, or maybe both are incorrect, right? So we can tell that, and then you turn true and return false from this side. So authentic function checks whether the username and password matches as that of the database. Since we are not using any database, we have hard coded it here, but in the near future we'll be attaching and using MySQLi database. Okay, and isValid function is checking whether the username and password is not blank and giving user nice user-friendly messages, which is the job and our duty as professional web developers. You should always try and give user-friendly message and user-friendly or user understandable user-friendly message. Okay, now authorize is, for example, I'll only say in authorize user dot set message. I'll take the user out, user dot get username, and I'll say plus, and I'll give it a bit of space, is logged in. So more than one space will not be taken automatically by the compiler. If you want to give 2-3 spaces, then you will have to attach the NBSP, that's an NBSP of HTML, right? Okay, that's why it's authorize is not boolean, because authorize has to display the message only. All right, so everything is done, and go back to this now. Sorry, we have to encapsulate them, right? So we will go outside the class, call login, login will call isValid, isValid will call isAuthentic, isAuthentic will call authorize. So that means you are having a chain of processes. Even if one process is breaking, second process is not called. One process is broken, second process is not called. So that is the true object-oriented approach towards login, or we can say privilege control or authorization control module design, right? So now here at what I will do, I will say if inside this class there is a function isValid, and pass the object, because the isValid function accepts a parameter of type model. You have typed, you have to pass the model here. If this is valid, then do this. And now if this isValid function has returned true, writing is equivalent to true, or not writing is equivalent to true is one and the same thing, right? Even if you don't write, if means that you have to return back either true or false to if, right? So it means true. If this dot isValid function is true, you write or you don't write. So let's say, for example, we write it here, and then the second thing, if it is true, we are testing the second thing. Now if it is authentic, if this dot isValid function is authentic, returns true. And now if this is also true and this is also true, what is your job? Authorize, call this dot authorize, and your job is done. This is void and this is void, everything is set and done now. So let me print screen and show you the comparison between what I told you earlier and what you understood earlier. So let me take it here and say accounts controller. So this is your accounts controller right here. Login function public. You can say both the public functions, the class and the function is red, right? So that's why I mark them public, because red is public right here. And now the third thing that you have to consider and you have to understand, this is private. Private is valid is here. Private is authentic is here, and private authorizes here. And now you have to go outside and call login. Login is going to call isValid. So this login will call isValid, you can see, right? And isValid will call isAuthentic. isValid will call isAuthentic, and if everything goes fine, authentic stays there, and then this authentic is going to call the function authorize. So now this is how it happens, right? So this is the true object-oriented methodology and true object-oriented approach. Now then we are done with the model. Now then we are done with the controller. Let us go and apply it practically. So we don't need to wait too much or too long to apply this, right? Okay, so let me go to the main page and open scriptlets here. So I don't have to do much in scriptlets, but since I have to pass variables back to scriptlets, so that's where we have to use them in here, right? So let me say I'll say accounts. What is the spelling? Account C-O-N. Okay, account C-O-N-T-R-O-L-L-E-R-C. So let me see is equivalent to new A-double-U. Account C-O-N-T-R-O-L-L-E-R. Accounts controller C, or let me call this as AC, is equivalent to new accounts controller. Not able to get it. Okay, just me wait a second. Accounts controller JSP class 1. Okay, it's in the package controller, right? So let me go to page directive and import it. So let me have a page directive and let me say import. So let me say import controller. It should be automatically first imported. I don't need to import it. Why isn't this being imported? Let me go to login function and check. No, this is already what we have deleted, so we don't need it here. But still, I will check it out. Why isn't this getting imported? Accounts controller. I don't know what is wrong here. Accounts controller. Let me go back to main page. So I'll say accounts controller AC is equivalent to new accounts controller. So this should give me an object of accounts controller. Okay, let me try again. Accounts controller, maybe spelling mistake, and the package is controller. Okay, let me go with this. Yeah, it's imported there. I had spelling is accounts, so we made a mistake right here. Let me correct the mistake. So it's not accounts controller. So let me go to refactor, rename ACCOUNTS. So now it's accounts controller. So I'll refactor. Fine, now you'll be able to directly import it. Now you can see. I'll say accounts controller. Now let me carry on with this. ACCOUNTS. Now see, accounts controller is imported. Or you can import it like this. Accounts controller AC. You can see here. Add import for controller.accounts controller AC is equivalent to new. Shift and space bar to just get it quickly. Accounts controller. Shift and space bar can give you the quick access right here. And AC dot login. Now I have to pass model here. I haven't created an object of model, so I'll say model. And now if you see write model, and you can get import for model. If you want to quickly do that, control and space bar, you can see you will import it, but no, you're not getting it. So let me do it this way. Add import for model. So model user equals new model, right? Okay, so now I'm passing the model to ac.login. My job is done. But imagine we still have to get, do you remember, we still have to get message, and message last time was displayed here inside scriptlet. So I'll display the message here, but this time I'll call the object. I'll say display user dot get message. Okay, all right, so now let us see what happens. We are supposed to get a null pointer exception here. Okay, yeah, we are getting null pointer exception only because of the fact that we have to execute the code using the HTTP post. So I will say if request dot get method, right, is equivalent to or dot equals. Better is to use dot equals for string comparisons. All right. Okay. And then do this. So we haven't passed anything. If you remember, we're still going to get an error right here, but not on get, but on post. The first error that we are getting now is, so let me close this so that we can check the error. Okay, so let me comment this for you because debugging is required for development process. So now you can see that you're getting it basically because of message, right? So I'll show you why are you getting, because everything else here will run on post, so we don't need to worry about this. But here you're displaying user.getMessage, but where is user defined? User is defined only when post happens. When will post happen? When you click the login button. So now what I'll do, I will take this user out and I will declare it here. So this user is available on post and this is also available on get. So that's why it's out. So creating an object is not an issue. Now we don't have any error on get, so we still get null. Why do we get null, right? If I ask you this question, because we are displaying user.get message, right? What is inside the message? Have we set the message? You can either say user.set message hello, and then you'll easily get it hello. But since we have not set any message here, right, initially when you load it on get, we will get null. So in order to solve this problem, I'll go to model, right, and once I go to model, I'll initialize this message with null, right? So initialize this message with blank string. Now you're not going to get any null, maybe. Okay, just a moment. What happened? Okay, we're getting it now. Okay, we're still getting this null. Okay, we're giving it to username. Sorry, what happened to me? We have to give it a message. Fine. So now the message is blank. Now you're getting null pointer exception. This is quite fine. You're getting this exception, means everything is working fine. So we're getting an exception because we're calling login and we're passing users. What is happening in login, right? You're going to valid. What is happening in valid? You're checking if user.get username. So get username will work only when you set it up, right? We haven't set the username right yet, right? So what is the job? What is our job now is to set user.set username something, user.set password something. And where is that something going to come from? That's txt username and txt password. So I'll pass it direct here. Request.get parameter, and I will pass txt username, request.get parameter, and I will pass txt password, right? So since I passed txt username and password, now everything should work fine. Login, please write your username. So I write my username. I'll get please write your username. I write my username. I still get please write your username. There is something problem. User.set username, request.get parameter txt username, and txt password is also there. Okay, let me copy paste and check. Still getting please write your username. We should get please write your password. We're still getting please write your username. That means there is something wrong in the accounts controller, and that too is valid function. If user.get username, if it is not equivalent to empty, yeah, okay, and if user.get, if not, user.get username dot equals blank, right? So if it's not, then do this, else user.set message please write your user name, right? And then nested if user.get password dot equals blank, if it's not equivalent to blank, okay, return true, else user.set message please write your password. But why are we getting this? Something is wrong somewhere. Go to main page, accounts controller, AC is equal to new account, user.set username, request.get control. We have returned something wrong. Let me go to model and check back. There's something wrong with the model. We have username, we have password. So set username is going to do take string username here and return username. Why are we doing? Okay, set password is also doing the same, right? So let me call this dot password is equal to password, right? Okay, and is everything else fine? Get username, return this dot username. Okay, get password, return this dot, get message and set message. Okay, I hope everything else is fine. We were returning set username was taking username, so that's why we were getting that message, because username was given but password was always empty. So let me try again. Okay, please write your Write your username. Okay, let's try. Please write your username. You write your username. Please write your password. You write your username and you write your password. Incorrect username and password, and you write correct. Right, so you get Fahim is logged in. So authorize, authentication, and every single thing is working fine. So I'll be creating a file for you and I'll be forwarding file. Tell me if you're having any problems down in the comment section, or you can message me directly. Right, so see you in the next class. And before starting the next class, I hope you will practice this very hard and do your best to become champs in this field, inshallah. Bye bye, take care, see you, and have a nice day.